I'll see you guys in the dark.
About 2 years ago, I was going shopping for a Valentine's Day gift for my girlfriend, since I thought it would be a nice gesture. The walk to the store from where I live is about 5 to a 10-minute walk. It was around 8 p.m., so I just wanted to get home. I was walking in the road because there was next to no cars going down the road, and I didn't feel like going through the park. I was approaching the park when I realized I was being followed. I thought nothing of it at first, so I just got walking. He then got closer and closer. When I was walking past, I hear a, "Hey, kid!" I was shocked, but I wanted to ignore him, so I just kept walking. When he said it again, but a bit more violently. So I turned around, and this guy was in a pissing distance from me. I'm 6'1", and this man just a bit taller than me. He then tried to set up a conversation like, "How was your night?" I felt a bit relieved, and kind of thought poorly of myself for judging him so soon. I was right to assume it, though. He then tries to keep a conversation going, and then proceeds to ask, "Where are you going?" I just said, "The store." He then walked up to a car. He then said, "I can give you a ride." I told him no thank you, I can walk from here. But he kept asking the same question. And then he said, "What about car surfing?" He then tried to show me what it was. I still declined. This guy was really creeping me out. I was still walking down the road while this was happening. He still followed me, and thankfully I was reaching the store, and he left me alone. For now. I then got the candy heart chocolate box and a teddy bear. I was walking back home when I saw the guy again. The weird part was the following from the other side. I feel like he waited for me, just to come walking by again. This was starting to scare me a bit. He then yelled, "Hey!" I was getting pretty scared at the moment. I then turned around. This guy was like 6'5" and weighed a lot more than me. Being hesitant, I turned around. Now this guy was starting to jog this way over to me. And then I noticed something off. The car was gone, meaning this guy either walked here or he wasn't alone. I acted oblivious, like I didn't know the car was gone. He tried starting another conversation. I was really uncomfortable the first time, so I just said, "I really need to get back," and I started walking a bit faster to the fastest way home, which is through an alley. When I was going through, he was gone, and I was thankful. But when I was walking down the alley, I don't know what it was, but I saw the same car he was claiming to be his. When I went home, I wanted to know more about this guy. I looked online for something about him, and there was nothing. I wanted to know about the car. I didn't believe for a second that it was his, so I looked it up, and it was reported as stolen. I didn't think much of it, but reported it just in case. I wasn't sure if they found it, or even found the guy in general. I hope I never have to deal with this dude ever again. When I was a kid, I used to go to the Smoky Mountains and stay with my friend and her family for a few days a week. One time, my friend's dad drove me and my friend down to Asheville, which was about an hour and a half away. My friend and I had a lot of makeup that day because we were preteen girls and we were having fun with makeup. Even with the makeup, it was still very obvious that we were children. We went into a mellow mushroom to sit down and eat when a man who was probably in his 30s or 40s started talking to my friend. The situation quickly turned sinister when it became apparent that the man thought my friend's dad was a pimp, and he was interested in my friend. I'm pretty sure my friend's dad threatened to disembowel the guy, and then we all promptly left and drove back to the mountain. My friend's dad had to explain to us later what had happened and why we went home so abruptly. I'll make this short. This happened back in 2012. I was a recent transplant to Northern California, and I had recently lost my job and headed to the Bay Area.
I decided while I was looking for a job in SF, I'd stay in a Motel 6 in East Oakland with my pit bull, Mick Jeromeo. One night, I decided to walk about a quarter mile up the road to Jack in the Box with my pit for a late night snack. On my way back, as I'm walking across the entrance to an abandoned hotel, a shitty little Ford Focus cuts in front of me, cuts me off, and stops. I don't know if my explanation will do the next part justice, but I'll try. Out of the car hops an overweight lady dressed like a drag queen with shabby clothing. Threads were frayed. There were old stains on her shirt, and her hair was a mess. Before I could see her face, she started talking to me. It was almost like she was hiding her face. The words I could make out of her garbled sentence were date and baby. It sounded like she had a mouthful of marbles. I tried to ignore her and continue walking, but she cut me off again, with her body this time, and tried to touch my arm. When she reached for my arm, I got a glimpse of her face. This is when I got freaked out. She was a black lady, like Denzel's shade. Her face was riddled with what looked like open sores and pock marks. There was a sheen of liquid that covered her entire face that looked like a pus and blood mix. It had green and pink tint to it. I noticed this on the back of her hands, too. You can imagine that I was thoroughly disgusted. I instantly went into flight mode, sidestepped her, and dragged Rome away from her quickly. She protested with a mouthful of jibber-jabber, but I kept moving, quickly. I looked back to see her car pulling out and heading in the opposite direction. So crackhead prostitute zombie lady, let's not meet ever again.
To begin, this started when I was 14. I'm female, and now I'm 21. I just transferred to a new high school in the middle of the school year as a freshman with my twin sister. I was enrolled into a Spanish 2 class where I met Tony, and that was where the obsession began. But when I started my class and met Tony, I instantly thought that he was attractive. He was tall, brown hair, and beautiful eyes for a guy, and was also a year my senior. But I did not notice he was extremely shy and kind of awkward, but I made up excuses to talk to him, asking him about the homework and other meaningless small talk. He took to me and asked if I wanted to walk around during lunch and talk. I happily agreed to this. He was obviously not very confident and didn't know how to initiate a conversation, so I did most of the talking. Even went as far as to asking him for his phone number. After a few days of texting and talking, I can tell he doesn't have any friends, and he is kind of negative and has a pessimistic view towards life. It was rather draining and disappointing. Things he would say were kind of unsettling, or I guess just unusual for me. He would text me fantasizing about being a superhero, kind of like role-playing, in which I was the damsel in distress, and he was my savior, and text me somewhat similar to those choose-your-own-adventure, always ending in the damsel and the hero kissing and being together. He had an obsession with Slasher from the Scream movies. Overall, he was a nice guy, but different from what I was expecting or attracted to. Time passes. Valentine's Day is coming up. We're talking practically every day, so he asked me to be his Valentine. I agree, somewhat reluctantly. So it's Valentine's Day. He walks up to me and gives me a pack of Hershey's Kisses and some Twizzlers. I don't really like Twizzlers, so I handed them back to him and gave him a kiss on the cheek and went to my class. Yes, I know that was kind of a bitch move, but was honestly losing interest in him at that point, and I told him before I didn't like red vines or any candy like that. During the day, I received more gifts, flowers and candies from others, like my friends, and I see Tony, and I can tell he's extremely upset by this, but he doesn't say anything to me. He texts me later in the day saying how stupid he felt and how he is outdone by everyone else. I didn't respond to this. Over the next few weeks, I gradually talk to him less and less. Class is awkward, and I can tell he wants to say something to me, but he never does. I later learned from my twin sister that he asks her every single day about me. if I'm talking to someone else, if I like him, how to win me over, confiding in her that he has never talked to a girl before. And at first, I think it's sweet, but I still no longer had a romantic interest in him. We would talk at school sometimes. He would bring me homemade cookies, walk me to the train station. Still tries to text and call me in the evenings after school. But I was talking to someone new who eventually became my boyfriend for the rest of high school. His name is Brandon. When I started dating Brandon, I knew that Tony was absolutely devastated. He then started telling people around school that I was his first kiss. I was confused because I didn't know a kiss on the cheek counted as a first kiss. But to each their own, I guess. It was somewhat upsetting because people were getting the impression that we dated, or that I played him, which was not the case at all. I could still talk to Tony as a friend. He was in the same grade and classes as my new boyfriend, and he would always tell me how he thought Brandon didn't like him, and that he felt like Brandon knew about us. I told Tony there was nothing to know. We weren't anything but friends, and Brandon was totally chill, non-confrontational, the stoner type, not in his nature to stir up drama over nothing, and definitely not the jealous type. The school year was coming to an end, and Tony comes running up to me after the last day of school and hands me this, I shit you not, 60 or 70 page notebook, wide ruled, if it makes a difference, explaining all the ways he's in love with me, and how everybody at the school thinks poorly of me, and how he treats me better, blah blah blah. I read it once, show my twin, and she tells me how weird and uncomfortable it makes her. We both agree on that. I stash it away and don't speak of it to anybody. I act like nothing happened, and I still talk to him as a friend occasionally. I worked a lot in high school in my free time, and spent a lot of time with my boyfriend and friends, and didn't think much about Tony at all. Time goes on, we eventually stop talking. I see him around school, and he never really is with anybody else. He's usually alone, which I don't find strange anymore, considering how awkward and quiet he can be. Fast forward another year. I'm a junior. Tony and Brandon are both seniors, getting ready to graduate. Tony texts me out of the blue one day, and tells me he has a written story, and it would mean the world to him if I would be the first to read it, and give him feedbacks. And being the person I am, I agree. So he comes up to me at school the next day and hands me this fat notebook and tells me to take my time reading it and to give him honest feedback when I was finished. I read the story in 4 class period. It was around 300 pages long. Anyways, the story takes place in a Game of Thrones era type setting. The 3 main characters are Eric, who is Tony, Alva, which is me, and Isaac, which is Brandon, for the sake of the confusion. I'll be referring to the characters by our names. The only reason I know the characters were us and not fictional was simply by the way he had described them, literally identical to our physical appearances. To continue, Tony was the son of the king or whatever, the rest of us mere peasants. But Tony was always in love with me, but I was with Brandon. It was the annual time where our kingdom would go to battle with another for honor and glory, gladiator style. Tony thought it would be a wonderful time to prove himself, and volunteered. The night before our kingdom traveled to where the battle would take place, my character went to Tony in the middle of the night to express her love and fear, and they ended up having very graphic sex. It was truly disturbing. The next day, after they had arrived at the place of battle, my character went to his room again, where the same graphic encounter occurred again. And during, Brandon came looking for my character, in which we were caught. My character told Tony I didn't really love him, and ran after Brandon to apologize for being a harlot. Tony was devastated, and ultimately let his opponent kill him in battle because he couldn't handle the loss of the love of his life. Our kingdom goes back home, and in the middle of the night, Brandon sneaks through the window and murders me. He slits my throat. The end. As you can imagine, I was absolutely horrified and creeped out. I threw the book away and never told Tony what I thought about it. He must have known, because I never asked for it back. Tony and Brandon both graduate. Life goes on. Tony didn't try to reach out to me for a few years, until I was around 20. He messaged me on Instagram in the middle of the night. "Show me your feet. Submit to daddy." I always looked at your feet at school and would fantasize about them, along with links to a few foot fetish websites. I promptly blocked him. The next day, he messaged me on another account, a foot fetish and bondage account he ran. He asked me why I blocked him. I just blocked him again. Earlier last year on my new account, he messaged me basically calling me a whore, and how he wishes that I would die, and how he hated everyone we went to school with, and hoped they would all die too, and how he fantasized on how he would kill me for all the pain that I caused him. I was genuinely afraid, but I didn't know how to handle the situation. Was it really a death threat? I don't know. I later learned that he worked at a diner down the street from my apartment. I avoided it at all costs. I've since moved, and I haven't heard from Tony since. But multiple girls I went to high school with told me he was obsessed with me and would constantly talk about me to them, and how he would message them the same disgusting things while he was on a drunken stupor. Anyways, Tony, let's not meet ever again. So for a little backstory, and the story isn't that long at all. I was living with my ex-boyfriend at the time, and a family friend that I've known since I was in diapers. Our roommate, Stokes, had an old friend that had fallen on hard times. He would stay with us for a little bit while he got back on his feet and found a place, etc. At first, everything went fine. This was in the end of 08, first part of 09. Roommate's friend Jay seemed a little crazy, but harmless. He was a self-proclaimed Muay Thai master. Seemed like he knew what he was talking about, and claimed to have spent a couple years in the military. I didn't know the guy other than what he told me and Stokes. Stokes had known him for quite a while before we let him stay with us. I never felt right about being in the same room with him alone. However, I basically disregarded it as me being 18 years old and paranoid of everyone around me due to the past encounters with people. My boyfriend at the time, Dan, told me I had nothing to worry about, and that Jay just liked messing with people. Jay probably lived with us for about 6 months, did nothing to help maintain the house, and since I was the only one with a stable job, was basically supporting 3 grown men and myself on a movie theater paycheck. Stokes had helped with the state, but I bought our tobacco, as well as anything he wouldn't get on food stamps. As the months wore on, we started noticing things going missing. Mind you, we didn't have much, but we did have things of value. Stokes was involved in computer building and repairing on the side to try to supplement income best he could. We all decided it was time for Jay to leave, as the problems didn't start until he arrived, so we kicked him out. We weren't mean or rude about it, nor did we voice our suspicions. We just wanted to wash our hands of him and have him be done with it. Jay leaves, says he understands, and doesn't even try to argue or put up a fight. All is well and blissfully peaceful for a few nights after Jay leaves, so we think nothing about it, and we are just happy he's gone. One night after my boyfriend and I got done doing, adult stuff, we passed out naked in bed and went to sleep pretty early. Now I guess I should probably give a description of all of us. Me, I'm 5'4", female, 120 pounds. My ex, 6'4", 135, soaking wet. I didn't know he was a meth head behind my back, and I was naive enough to believe him when he said he wasn't. He is also 12 years older than me. My roommate Stokes, 6'7", 534 pounds at the time. Jay, 5'7", probably around 145 or so. So all of a sudden, I'm woken up by a strange noise, and I open my eyes to see Jay sitting on the edge of our bed by mine and Dan's head. Our bed was against the wall to the right of our door when you walk in. Our heads by the door. Jay had a lighter under his chin and said, "Rise and shine, motherfuckers." I won't forget that. I was thoroughly scared at this point. I felt vulnerable and exposed. I was naked, 18 years old, and was woken up by a psychopath in the middle of the night, in my own home. He started telling Dan and I all the terrible things he was going to do to me, like tie me up and torture me in front of Dan, while Dan was tied up and couldn't do anything about it. Dan started talking to him, trying to talk him down, and eventually we ended up giving him all our weed and the small amount of alcohol we had. He wanted cash, but we didn't have any at the time. All in all, it could have been a lot worse. And thinking about it now, almost 10 years later, I really think he was just trying to scare us. But that sure is a messed up thing to do. I'll never forget that face or the feeling that invoked me of being scared, vulnerable, and helpless. Since then, I've left my manipulative ex-boyfriend, became a great shot with weapons, found an amazing man, and moved on with my life. Leaving my ex was the best decision of my life. He is very mentally ill, and I have no doubt, had I stayed with him, that my life would have been much different now, and nowhere near as successful. So, Jay, let's never meet again. About 2 years ago, my SO and one of my friends decided to utilize a nice, somewhat warm day to fill up the tires on the motorcycles and just kind of cruise around. We set off, deciding on a nearby gas station that has an air pump on the side of the building. The lane with the pump also has a large parking lot opposite of the building for reference. We pull in, both motorcycles parked next to the pump, and what appeared to be a homeless man approached and was standing near me, making comments about the bike. No big deal. We're used to having people ask questions, or older crowds share their stories of back when they used to ride, and we love hearing about these stories. This man was different, and scared me shitless. I'm a small-framed female, so I made a point to try keeping away from him, but he kept standing closer to me. Our friend was agitated, and my boyfriend was baffled by some of the man's comments, which started off innocent, such as, "Oh man, I love motorcycles. I would love to go on a ride with you." But then they changed to, "Why don't you drop that hooker back off at the corner, and we can go on a ride together?" What? There were multiple comments made about myself being a hooker, a whore, etc. My boyfriend is a very even-tempered guy, but his friend is not. The situation escalated to where I think the man was attempting to touch the motorcycles, and my boyfriend's friend ended up yelling at the guy, who then ran across the bare parking lot and into the alleyway. We didn't want to take off because we were heading that way, and slightly scared that the man would try to do something as we rode by. Boyfriend's friend and I walked to the edge of the alley and looked towards the way the man went, and find him running in circles, yelling incoherently in the middle of the alleyway. We went the other direction. So, crazy dude at the gas station, let's not meet again. Some of this information is a little fuzzy, but this is what happened to my mom around 1989. I was around 19 or 20 years old at this time. My mom moved to Manitoba, Canada, to stay with her aunt and uncle until she worked. The company she worked at was on the top 3 floors of an office building on Portage Avenue. It was located on the same level as the cafe, so everyone came up to their floor and walked past its reception desk if they wanted something to eat. The receptionist would often ask my mom to cover for her while she went to her lunch break. While taking over one day, a handsome Middle Eastern man came up to her and struck up a conversation. He was around his 40s, dressed sharply, was very charming, and said he worked in a company a few floors down. He commented on how attractive she was and asked if she wanted to do any modeling for his company. He handed her his business card and left. She was not sketched out by the dude because he seemed so normal, but asked both her mom and aunt what she should do. They both told her to go for it, but to call the Better Business Bureau to see if the business was actually legitimate. According to the BBB, it was real. The next day, while my mom was working the desk, he approached her again and asked if she put any thought into the offer. He asked to meet her for lunch the next day at the Fairmont Hotel so that they could talk about the business. The hotel was in walking distance from the company,
and you could see it through the window of their offices, so she felt safe enough to go by herself. She did tell her coworkers, and they agreed to call the police if she was not back in time. The next day, she arrives at the hotel early. She finally spots him at the desk check-in table. She goes up to him and realizes he's checking into a room. She is getting a bit weirded out because all he said was that he wanted to have lunch in the restaurant there. He explains to her that he has a whole briefcase full of stuff that he wanted to present to her, and then it would be more private to show her in the hotel room. After a bit of arguing between my mom and him, he finally persuades her to go to the room. The check-in staff looked a bit skeptical while he handed him the key. He got in the elevator, and that is when she realized he does not even have a briefcase. And it wouldn't be in the room already because he had just checked in. Instead of getting the hell out of there like a normal person would, she follows him to the room. She takes the chair by the window while he lays down on the bed with his arms crossed behind his head. He can tell that she is uncomfortable, so he asks her what her dream car was, and said she could afford it in a few months by modeling for him. He said all she would have to do was wear different kinds of clothing and lingerie, and stand in separate partition rooms while buyers from all around the world would bid on the outfits, or bid on her. After his spiel in the company, he asked her to take her clothes off, so he can see her body because she needs to have a good figure to be able to model. Again, she is iffy, but he persuades her to get undressed in the bathroom and walk in a towel so he can get a good look at her. While she is in the bathroom, she hears him talking in a different language and laughing on the phone. She walks out in her towel, and he tells her to do a spin while he's still on the phone. But she gets freaked out and runs back into the bathroom to get dressed again. She opens the door and bolts out the room. He stands up and watches her run down the hallway, but luckily doesn't follow her. She tells her coworkers all about it, but she does not call the police because my mom was so embarrassed that she was dumb enough to do all of that for him. A few days later, while walking into work, she sees a bunch of cop cars surrounding the building. She later finds out by a coworker that the guy was arrested for soliciting of prostitution. I think that is what he was charged for, at least. She was freaked out that she could have gotten in trouble for getting into that situation, but the officers never asked her to come in for questioning. 2 weeks later, while walking to her parked car in a back alley, she saw him sitting in his car watching her with a big smirk on his face. I guessed that he got out on bail. She ran to her car and sped out of there. That was the last time that she ever saw him, and she moved back home a few months later. So, creep, stay away from my mom, and let's not ever meet.
It all started when I was 14 or 15. I worked in a local newspaper. I've written articles about stuff just for fun. I didn't get paid much, though. Okay, I was one of the participants in our art contest, and I have chosen her as a winner because her drawing was pretty cool. That's how we met, and I kinda fell in love with her. She wasn't a beauty at all. A mousy type, if I use this word correctly. Almost a bookworm, just without the glasses. Short, simple face, boyish figure and haircut, but she was the most interesting person that I've ever met. I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to offend anyone, just trying my best to describe her type. We had a lot in common, such as our love for anime and drawing. I haven't been dating anyone, and tried to make a move on her. We ended up in a relationship. That's when things started to get messed up. She broke up with me like every week. I was confused, to say the least. I cried a lot and didn't understand a thing. She came up with different stories. Her parents are against our relationship. Her phone was stolen. She loses consciousness from time to time, etc., etc. She even wrote a letter to me in which she described how her grandma is some sort of psychic, and she has seen future in which I kill her, or something like that. It was all childish bullshit if you think about that. Well, except maybe for her mother being kind of abusive. I talked with her about it, and she really has some sort of issues with her daughter dating anyone. Okay, I also tried to ruin my friendship with one girl, that I chatted with at least. When things get really bad, I decided to finish this fucked up relationship, and broke up with her. She said she already was into somebody else. A few years later, I found a new girl, but things haven't worked for us. And guess what? My crazy ex was here for me. She texted me, and we started chatting again. I was heartbroken at the time, with no friends and no support. I've decided, okay, I'll date her until someone comes up that's better. I know, I sound like some kind of asshole, but I was lonely, and I couldn't care less for a person who made me suffer so much. And guess what? Shit hit the fan yet again. I noticed that she was lying to me again. She was avoiding some places in town. I wonder why. Maybe because another boyfriend lived or worked there. Completely ignored my problems and my well-being. Became very cold at some point. We broke up again, and I found girl number 3 after a few years. My last ex at the moment. I hear you asking, so what? Why are you writing about some relationship we don't care about? She's just some weird girl. Well, bear with me, please. I am 25 right now, and she still tries to mess my life up. She monitors my social network pages, my Twitter, DeviantArt, Facebook, you name it. She herself has 4 different accounts, because I blocked 3 of them I know about. Sometimes she texts me and wants to help with my problems. Tells me things about how she changed, and how she is sorry for everything. But I'm not buying this shit at all. I met her a few months ago in the mall, and she tried to talk to me like we were old buddies. I've been going through very hurtful breakups. Yes, again. And she was all cheerful, and, hey, how's your life? I haven't seen you in a while. I talked to her a bit, and that's why I've known, yes, she monitors my online presence. So I wanted to ask your opinion about this. Oh yeah? I clicked this answer on your poll. So, I've been watching this show. Yeah, I know. I've checked your My Anime list. Okay, that's pretty creepy. Maybe you even know what I've drawn 1 week ago. Yep, it was this Marvel superheroine, right? At this moment I knew. I kind of fucked up. She'd said this without even looking it up. Without checking her phone. The only one way she could have knew it was if she checked it beforehand. I also discovered that she has seen my ex, the last one I dated for about 1.5 years. Like 6 times, and she remembered all of them. Guess what? Almost like she was spying on us. I confronted her about this whole situation, and she said that I'm sorry, okay? It's a bad habit of mine to check on all of this stuff. I'm trying to stop. I just want to watch all of this. You're an artist after all. I want to make sure that you're okay. I said, okay, I will help you. Tell me your account names so that I could block all of them. She answers, sorry, but I won't. I threatened her with some legal troubles or something and hoped it was finally over. Nope. She liked my repost on Twitter a few weeks ago. It's like saying, hey, I'm still watching. I have a very bad feeling she could have talked to my girlfriend and kind of convinced her to break up with me. Yes, she knows how to manipulate people and knows human psychology pretty well. But of course, I have 0 evidence, and my ex doesn't want to talk to me, so no answers from her either. There was one more similar situation. I have checked one anonymous chat, and someone joined my room. Of course, I've been using different nicknames. It turned out it was some kind of girl. We chatted a bit, and turned out she knows me after I showed my photo. Not a very smart move, I know. That's when things got pretty weird. I'm going to state she couldn't trace this photo back to me because it exists only on my computer. She started to tell me stuff like, yeah, we were on the same bus once, and I got so fucking horny over you. Too bad we can't meet because of the so-called obstacles. I thought she was some sort of troll, but she knew which places I visited and which movie I watched recently. Even if it was vague and inconsistent. She said she had seen me in the shop, but you can't see shit from outside because windows placed too high under the ceilings. I was still weirded out. All I have is her email that she gave me, but she never answers it. I don't think it's connected somehow, but it is very weird. I'm not sure if I'm risking something right now. I don't think that she will try to kill me or something, but still, I'm kind of scared. Laws in my country are not strict as they are in the US or in Japan, and I have no control over this situation. I almost have no evidence besides my testimony because I have been deleting all the conversations, except the last and the most important one. Police won't do anything until I get stabbed or something like that. I can't delete all my accounts just because, well, I am kind of an artist and trying to make myself a name. I have waited for her to just get tired of stalking me. It's been 10 plus years now. She was in a relationship, and I'm pretty sure she has no interest in me as a man, because she tried to break up with me a ton of times and cheated, and she didn't want to help me at all when I was depressed or suicidal. It's just like she wants to watch, but never interrupt. But then why she always makes her move when I break up with someone. Sometimes she even texted me when I was in a relationship. Maybe she wants to play with me and break me even more than I am already. I don't understand psychos. You may ask why I've talked to her all of these times. I just needed information. Why she does what she does, what she knows, etc. She doesn't look like some sort of maniac. That's just weird. I've tried to keep my enemies close, but like hell, it works. I think about moving to a different city, but I have no money on me right now. And if she really messed my relationship up in any way, shape, or form, I hope karma slaps this bitch very hard. For that, and for making me paranoid and having trust issues. Am I over-exaggerating, and she's just having some mental obsession issues? All I know is that for the last 10 years, she stalked me online and probably knows every common place and route that I take. I wonder if I'm in danger. If I'm not, I really hope she gets a life and just gets over everything and stops stalking me once and for all. So I, a 19-year-old female, live in a treatment/transition center currently where I am learning to recover from substances. So living here can be pretty interesting at times. So we live with a family who is trained in dealing with recovering youth. The average stay is 3 to 20 days, as it is encouraged to use the bed to transition onto a more hands-on treatment center. Anyways, the family occupies the upstairs, and the youth live in a basement suite downstairs. There's a lot of privacy, and we have our own kitchen and bathrooms. So I've had the longest run here at nearly 40 days. In addiction, you meet all sorts of people with super interesting and sometimes super volatile personalities. 4 days ago, we got a new intake, and her name was Christine. I didn't get to see her much, as I was out with my counselors when she arrived, but the requirement is that we go for a walk in the clinic immediately upon arrival. So this girl could be Steve Buscemi's doppelganger with a huge meth problem. Immediately, she feels the need to tell me about how she wasn't allowed in any of the stores around the walk-in clinic, as she was banned for shoplifting and never paid rent. My response was, okay, well, that's pretty shitty. I kind of felt empathy for her behavior, so I figured I'd just ignore her, as we seem to be extremely different people. And plus, I'm not here to make friends. That's just a bonus. The first night of her visit was in the kitchen making my favorite snack, Rice Krispies with melted peanut butter, and I just got this insane feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around, and this girl was just staring at me. Asking if I could help her merited no response. I was creeped out, but just brushed it off. Encounters like this would happen 3 or 4 times a day. Anytime she heard me in the kitchen, she would rush in just to stare at me. Pretty fucking weird, right? Well, it gets even weirder. The second night of her stay, I was in my room browsing Reddit, and on Skype with a good friend of mine. The way my door is, and the way that light shines under it allows me to see when someone is coming via their shadow. So I'm just happily Redditing away, and I see a shadow under my door. I assume it's my caretaker, just checking to see if I'm there, but the shadow doesn't go away, for close to an hour. So I knew it was her. Now I was starting to get really freaked out. This girl was stressing me out so much, and I constantly had to hide all my valuables because I legitimately know if I wasn't hiding them, they would just vanish. Today, she decided to discharge, though. Thank goodness. Upon her leaving, she did one last stare down in the kitchen and promptly told me to fuck off, and that her male prostitute friend would kick my ass. When asked to do her dishes, this was definitely a strange encounter for me. As many strange things don't happen to me, I doubt neither I nor my caregiver will ever forget it. My creepy and overly candid roommate in treatment constantly had silent Mexican stare-downs with me, and stood in front of my door for an hour in the middle of the night. God, I hope that I never see this woman ever again. She was just too creepy for my liking. When I was 19, my parents came to visit me during one of my college breaks. They stayed at a Holiday Inn, which surprisingly was nice given that it was located in a seedy section of town right off of I-95. After a day of doing various activities throughout the city, we retired to their hotel room to order some pizza and watch some amazing basic hotel cable. After some quality time spent with the folks, I grabbed the leftover pizza and walked to my truck, which was only about 20 yards away from their room. I got into the truck and started her up, ready to head back to my apartment, when I was greeted with a quick knock on the window. It was a middle-aged white woman who was a little weathered looking. I rolled down the window about halfway, and she started with one of those fake-ass stories every panhandler or bum starts off with. The kind where you immediately start tuning out after the first few words because you know it's complete and utter bullshit. I cut her off, blurting out some excuse as to why I couldn't drive her to the gas station. At least I think that's what she needed. She took it surprisingly well, then saw the pizza box sitting in the passenger seat. Her eyes brightened and asked me if she could have a slice. I told her no, that I didn't have much food, and this is true, I was a poor college student, and that I loved pizza so much. She then licked her lips and told me, "If you give me a ride to the store and a slice of that pizza, I'll suck your manhood." For whatever reason, I was completely flabbergasted by this random comment, and all I remember doing is grabbing a fistful of change out of my cup holder and basically chucking it at her and driving off. Not sure why I reacted like that. To this day, almost 8 years later, I'm still reminded of this encounter because I have a squeaky noise when I roll down my driver's window. Because a coin got lodged in there when I threw the change at her. I still laugh at it today, because given the proximity of my parents' hotel room, they couldn't have stepped out at any time, and would have seen their son being solicited by some hooker who gives out BJs for pizza. So, hooker at the hotel room, please, let's not meet again. You freaked me the hell out. Okay, so this started happening exactly a year ago. I was living in another city, attending university, my freshman year, and then roommates were moving out over them finishing their education. I needed to start looking for a new place, and I found 2 apartments, one in the center of the city, and the other nearby to where I was then located. Long story short, I moved into the other one, which was populated by 2 guys. One of them we'll call Matt. Matt had a great taste in music, had great friends. It was like the best friend I ever met. One of those people of whom you want to hang out with your whole life. The other one, Norris. Well, I never got along with him, mostly for him being kind of like the guy to follow around others. Like he had no backbone. Whatever Matt did to Norris, it was like something he needed to do, or back up Matt. After a week of smoking weed and hanging out, just having the best days of my life, another guy moved in. Dan. Dan had a dog with him, but his dog left soon, because it destroyed some wooden door, and it was either him or the dog. Matt had a girlfriend, Tina, that practically lived with us. You know, love and everything. Now, one day, Dan and I were sitting outside on our little terrace eating and drinking coffee. Usual morning routine. And Tina came to sit with us. She had a large bruise mark on her shoulder, so we asked her how did that happen. She said that Matt hit her, and we had just brushed it off, thinking she's messing with us. A few days pass, It was a Tuesday night. I was in my room doing a seminar for a subject, and I heard a loud bang, like a bomb that went off near my head. I got up off my chair all nervous, went to investigate. On the other end of the hallway, I saw Matt's hand on Tina's throat, and him saying some things to her in a very rough voice. Matt had a glass door, and while this was happening, there was no more glass on the door. They argued, she cried, and they both went into the night. The very next day, Tina told me and Dan that Matt used her head to break the glass from the door. The most insane part about this is that they kissed and made up. They loved each other again after a shitstorm like that. She even made us lunch as an apology. I honestly thought I was losing my mind. Of course, things didn't end there. It was Friday, 3 days after the incident. That day I had plans to go on a /Miles Kennedy concert in another city. But due to university and having to take an exam that day, I put my priorities straight, sold the tickets, and went to take my exam. Later that day, Matt, Tina, and Norris were going out. Me and Dan stayed in, because Dan had no money, and I felt like staying inside. He was giggling the entire time, so I asked, was it the weed? He replied that it were some shrooms, so I decided to take some money and try them. We went to his friend's house where I got my dose, hung out there for a bit, and then we returned to our home. We were having a blast, like I can't even describe the feeling. We were happy, and we didn't know what was coming to us next. At around 1 a.m., Matt burst into the apartment and started packing some stuff. We assumed he and Tina had another fight. He was yelling at us to turn down the music. He had a really psychotic look on his face. We went outside after him to see Tina, sitting on a short brick wall across our house, in tears, with a bone coming out of her leg, and blood coming out of her mouth. So yeah, he broke her leg, and knocked her tooth out. And that was all happening in the street while Norris was watching, without doing shit to stop Matt on their way to the apartment. Me and Dan were out of our minds with what we've witnessed. Being on shrooms and experiencing something so traumatizing was insane. We contemplated calling the cops, but both Tina and Matt disagreed. Matt and Norris took Tina to a cab and into a hospital. There, she lied. She said she fell on some stairs. Me and Dan were outside the whole night, just trying to pull all the pieces together. Dan told me that Matt did stuff like this before, to every girl that he had. He was just very good at masking his wild side from everyone. Dan went home that morning, and I stayed alone in a nut house. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a girl's voice, and I really thought I lost it by this point. But when I woke up, Tina was again there. Her leg was taken care of in the hospital. She had a cast on it. I talked with Matt about it, and he told me the most craziest thing that I've ever heard. That some people express their love in that way, he being one of them. I talked with her for some time, trying to get her to leave and never come back, and to call the police. She packed her stuff, and we went outside, waiting for her friends to come and pick her up. Matt stormed outside with a big knife in his hand. I cannot even express how his eyes looked. He told us if we mentioned this to anyone, he'd come after us, and he'd kill us. In that moment, I knew that the man I once met, the greatest friend in the world, was long gone, and I needed to get out of there as soon as possible. I left that day, called every number in my phone, left a lot of things there, but I didn't care. My life was on the line. I settled at a friend's home and lived there for a while. University was ending, exams were coming, and I went home to clear my head. When I returned, I had a conversation with Tina, and she told me she called the cops on him. He was then awaiting trial. Don't know what happened since I lost contact with Tina, and I really don't want to remind her on the terrible things that he did to her. Now I know. Why didn't I engage him? I had a couple of chances. Mostly because every fight they had, they would be together again like nothing ever happened. And due to the fact that Matt was a capoeira expert, while I was this guy that went to a gym rarely, and that Matt was really crazy and unpredictable. So, Matt, let's not meet ever again. Okay, so this happened 4 months ago. Just to give you an insight on why I decided to post it now, well, here it goes. I have a restraining order on the roommates, and earlier today I saw them driving damn near too close for comfort towards my house. I still live in the same place. My SO, Kevin, and I started working at the same place. We were homeless, and, well, our boss had a place to rent and offered to us and another couple who was also financially struggling. Or so we thought. Everything was fine for the first month or so, and then it went sour. The female roommate, Susan, started going a little, let's say, nutty. At first, Kevin and I accepted it as bitchiness, but as time went on, it got unbearable. So the rent and utilities were split 50-50. Grocery purchased separately. Well, Kevin and I lived in our room for the majority of the time. We kept to ourselves and basically stayed out of the way. Susan thought since she and her SO, Rick, had a child, they were the main renters, and we just had a room. The first thing Kevin and I noticed was our food going missing. The second thing was there was only one who ever bought supplies and groceries. The third was that they leave their 3-year-old unattended for hours, and without asking or notifying Kevin and I. Finally, the fourth thing was we were the only roommates when it came to cleaning up after them. So basically, we were living help. There are so many things that have happened and not enough time to type it all out, so I'll just try and do one small incident until I can get another chance. So it started again going sour after Kevin and I stopped providing for them, buying groceries, and stopped cleaning up after them. Susan started demanding things like where we were, what we spent our money on, and then I needed to get off my ass and take care of her family. Rick was also calling our boss/landlord and complaining about how rude we were for staying in our rooms all the time. So here's the first encounter that kind of, well, freaked me out a little. Whenever Kevin wasn't around, Rick would make comments. Sexual comments about my breasts and butt. I blew it off at first, as he's just being nice, until he came waltzing into my bathroom, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each time the door was closed. Locked. Yes, he picked it. And I just got out of the shower. Luckily, every time I was wrapped in a towel. The last time, though, made my skin crawl. I was out of the shower, and I barely wrapped a towel around me when the door flew open. I whip around to see Rick just standing there and staring. I'm speechless. There's no way around him if he decided to do anything. After about a minute of just staring, it's like he remembered Susan and Kevin were right outside, and could hear me scream if he tried anything. He just turns around and walks away. I'm still standing there, hoping Kevin would sense my fear and come running, but he didn't. I told him what happened, and he blew it off as an accident. But I'm not sure if it was. Was it?
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.